Would you accept the claim that the importance of behavioristic psychology has faded because of a lack of empirical evidence as such, while cognitive science has apparently prospered? Would you accept that claim?
Well, no. I don't know the field well enough to judge that, really. I know that fashions have changed, and there may be a basis for them. But to me, the importance of the behaviorist discipline is making objective sense of the statement of a problem. And it's by behavioral criteria invariably that we formulate a problem for physiological investigation. It's the symptoms of the disease, but which then gets investigated for its microbial etiology, and similarly in psychology.
So by your lights, you think that there still is a sort of, as it were, a dispute between perhaps a sort of mentalistic approach as compared with a behavioristic approach? I mean, you would see that as still an up-and-running dispute.
Well, I think so. When I think of individuals, I think of Jerry Fodor, for instance, on one side, and people more of my persuasion on the other.
Okay, thanks.
Within the area of cognitive neuroscience, we find both neurophysiology, say, and mentalistic cognitive psychology. Neither is fundamental science. Both are some considerable way above the level of fundamental physics, but I would sense that you would have a greater sympathy for the credentials of neurophysiology than of mentalistic cognitive psychology. Understandably enough, given meaning skepticism. Now, suppose it turned out that the notion of meaning or intentionality that a large part of cognitive psychology made use of was in certain respects different from the fully mentalistic notion about which you're skeptical. What I have in mind is we might say that an indication on a fuel gauge means that the tank is half empty. This comes to scarcely more than that there is a reliable correlation between the state of the fuel gauge and the state of the tank, and perhaps that that's the function of the fuel gauge. That's why it's there. If it were to turn out that just that notion of meaning, roughly speaking, reliable correlation plus perhaps some notion of function, if that was all that large tracts of apparently mentalistic cognitive psychology needed, would that incline you to be more sympathetic to those areas of psychology?
Well, I would certainly accept that without hesitation. I just wonder how unsympathetic I am. Anyway, think of what a fundamental role in translation itself, for instance, that I give to empathy.
Professor Quine, in much of your writing, you have used thoughts about how children learn language. In fact, you've made what seem to be pretty serious empirical claims about how children learn language. So, well, just to take one example, you've said that they learn observation sentences first. Perhaps another example that is perhaps a little less clear in your writing is that divided reference comes rather late. So you talk about the first use of the word mama being something more like a mass term. Now, the psychologist Susan Carey has argued that divided reference actually comes rather a good deal earlier than you seem to be saying that it does. My question is this. I just wonder what role these these speculations as to the facts about how children learn language, what role they play in the more essential parts of your views in philosophy of language. And is it possible that many of the claims you make about how children learn language could be wrong, yet leave what you really care about in those views untouched?
Well, I wonder, take your example first. No, I haven't suggested that what the child first learns in language are observation sentences, but that observation sentences are his first access to cognitive language. And this, this I've never seen in such writings on development of language in a child as I've read. Piaget, some of Piaget's work and the like. But this is an example where it just stands to reason. How else could it be, besides which one does observe one's child learning? But at other points, now when it comes to the question of divided reference, that is going to hinge on criteria of governing our terminology and kind of sophistication that the psychologist in question might or might not have. It's not a clear issue, and it would be a matter rather of reading and digesting these experimental results in child psychology on the one hand, and the child psychologist perhaps on the other hand reading and digesting these more logical analyses. But it struck me on the whole that what use I make of developmental psychology turns on just so little in the way of actual theory, and so little that could be that there would seem to be debatable or refutable. For instance, the matter of a similarity space under whatever name, what some kind of psychologists have called generalization classes. There has to be that for the habit formation, and well, luckily, mercifully, it's turned out that just these aspects, these generalizations that stand to reason once one just reflects on the situation, turn out to be enough to enable one to go on and draw further conclusions and raise further problems, and thus make for some division of labor and leave a great deal of a way of interesting developmental detail to the specialists in that domain.
Presumably, it could turn out that there were some human-like species, or perhaps we could genetically engineer a species where the children right away, as young babies, even before they get language, have a clear appreciation of the biological relationship of motherhood. And then their first use of the term mother would be as a non-observation term.
Yes, no doubt. All these things, in fact, from my point of view, philosophy generally, the kind of philosophy that can recognize as legitimate, is continuous with science and is fallible, incorrigible. This would be a great surprise, certainly would, and it would make a difference. As for the things that actually go on, I think the notion of observation sentence, as acquired by at the very beginning by the small child, is of a piece with what happens among the birds and the apes with their signals. Because these, what I'm calling observation sentences, aren't grammatically sentences normally. They may or may not be. The more usual traditional expression among philosophers is observation term, and I've avoided that in favor of sentence because of specific concern and theory about reference and what constitutes reference, what constitutes a term in that referential sense, these terms, which do the referring, are in large part one-word observation sentences in their origin in the child's learning, and then get absorbed into the overall theory. So there seems to be apart from twin Earth kind of science fiction or philosophy fiction, this seems, as natural science goes, fairly firm, reasonable basis.